What's up, storytellers? I'm C.R. Rowanson, the Magic Engineer, and this is Spells and Specialists, where we use magic and stories to teach technical topics and communicate science. Today, I am joined, as always, with my wonderful co-host, the eco-friendly Magus, Lovis. How you doing, Lovis?
Hi. Yes, I'm Lovis, and I run Ecofictology on YouTube, and I talk all about ecofiction, reading it, writing it, and how it can be used as a science communication tool. And I really do try not to push the ecological agenda on these stories that we build, but it does tickle me a little bit when it does just wander into that territory all on its own.
Yes, and our guest for this video and for the last couple is again Navarre, who runs the Solarpunk Station YouTube channel and has a blog. And yeah, how are you doing, Navarre?
I'm doing pretty well this morning.
Is there anything else that you want to share in case other people, for whatever reason, haven't seen the first video over on Ecofictology, where we just nerd out about your specialty, or the second video on the Magic Engineer, where we took that specialty and turned it into a seed crystal? Anything you'd like to give as a recap?
I think the only thing is, I guess I'm here because I used to be a researcher in energy materials, mostly batteries and capacitors. So we're kind of coming at this magic system from this direction of we'll go over the high points here in a second, but yeah, the transformation and storage of energy.
Yes. Is there anything that you guys want to bring up or make sure that is on our minds and any of the watchers' minds before we dig into the blueprint? Because this video is all about taking the seed crystal and forming the outlines of a magic system using the magic system blueprint. Anything that we want to cover first?
I suppose kind of the highlights of part one and part two would be the take-home messages and the goal for communicating this science and technical topic. It's very technical. And then potentially the seed crystal that we ended on.
Yeah.
So I will look at my notes, my many notes.
Copious notes that we always end up with.
So many notes, so many. With you, you're just too interesting, Navarre. I can't keep up. I can't write fast enough. The main take-home messages that I wrote down is that energy and energy management is all about transformation, and everything has inefficiencies like heat waste, and we can talk about what other kinds of waste might come out of inefficiencies in these kind of energy management. And then actual power and work is got by having two opposing charges and movement of particles between those charges. And that is how you get actual work done. And then the goal of all of this, why we are here, the magic system that we're going to build in a second, and the story that we're going to brainstorm later on, is to inform people and make people less reticent to embrace change, as we in our own reality kind of have this push towards renewables. Some people are quite hesitant to embrace that because they don't understand it. We fear what we don't understand. And so if we can make it a bit more accessible and get people interested in it, and then maybe that transition is a little bit easier. So that, I think, was the goal and the take-home messages of part one.
And is a very, very important goal, because that means I will need to pull back from my standard dark doom and gloom and focus more on like the positive aspects of how all of this is making things better, rather than just here's all the problems it can cause.
Yes, yeah. I think Navarre and I both bring a slightly solarpunk attitude towards this kind of storytelling.
which is good. Which is good.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be Pollyannish. It can have problems for sure, because otherwise it's not very interesting.
Right, but more hopeful
we like
and less
conflict.
about
trending in a positive direction.
Yes. Less about the corporate corruption and manipulation of this new power and more about how it has potential to help the world. That kind of stuff.
But we can mention the corruption and power greediness.
So then when we went through everything for the seed crystal, we went kind of all over the place trying to figure out what was really going to make things click. And this is going to be reflected. We're actually going to approach the blueprint a little different than normal. And I'll get to that in a second. But the seed crystal that we ended up with is that humanity has discovered a new energy quanta that they have called Farcanes, and that people, creatures, and places can act as electrodes in magical batteries, which has all kinds of fun implications
Yeah.
and all of that. Navarre, were there any like really big things that leapt out to you from our previous talks that you wanted to make sure we all kept in mind?
Let me check my notes.
Notes are always handy.
Yeah. I think kind of the stuff we boiled it down to was the really important part. Because like you said, we went a little bit everywhere. And I think one of the things we didn't, I don't think anything that's important right now, but might come up during the blueprint stuff.
Okay.
I think the only thing that I would mention is that we really wanted to make the magic system collaborative.
Yeah.
That was something that was bandied around, a collaborative magic system.
I think that's because of the different charges. I thought it would be interesting to have a magic system that you can't really use by yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which, so normally with this, we would jump right into the blueprint. Actually, because there is so much that we can do with this, and because your kind of driving factor in a lot of stuff is more of the setting and the settings connection to theme, I actually want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the magical effects. I want to make sure that we understand what the magic can do and how people can start implementing it and how that's going to fit into this kind of solar punk theme and setting before we jump into the blueprint. So with that, we have stated that they can be the electrodes in these magical batteries. Well, a battery is just a storage of energy, and then that energy still has to go through some kind of process to actually do stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how are we picturing that working? Because with what we have here of humans and places acting as the electrodes, really all that means is that I can use the difference in power between myself and Lovis, or like myself and the Eiffel Tower, and use that differential to induce a flow of magical energy. But once it's flowing, we got to do something with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of stuff are we thinking? Are we thinking this is going to be very this is going to be like a whole new branch of technology? Is it going to be more magical? What are people vibing with?
In my head, although it kind of complicates things, I'm kind of seeing both to some extent, because I'm kind of seeing people like CERN or whoever discovers the quanta, but then I'm seeing like your traditional like current magical practitioners being like, oh, it was always kind of like, is this working or not? But we didn't understand this key thing. And so they're like, okay, with this new knowledge, we can do more of our like natural magic.
Okay.
But then the scientists are also like, well, if we hook you up to this thing, can we run a light bulb off of it?
Okay.
I'm seeing kind of two parallel paths happening at the same time. And I don't know if we end up in the story, there's some sort of conflict between those. I don't know, but that's at least what's been percolating, just throwing some things out there. But
okay.
I have a note here that you said there's two different paths of studying this energy, and that they might be butting heads at some point. So there's like a science, and then there's like kind of all the people who are into witchcraft or woo-woo and things that now is generally not accepted. They're like, see, it was real. And so you have the two branches. That's the note that I have.
Okay. So then with that, it sounds like we're going to have part of the reason I wanted to bring this up is this is in a great place to communicate not just some of these theories about like energy, but actual principles about electrical energy, photoelectric energy, thermal energy, and stuff like that. And it sounds almost like to get it working in technology, it really is a new form of energy. So there's probably going to be new materials, new processes in order to harness that and convert this flow into converting this flow into electrical energy, converting this flow into thermal energy, potentially places trying to convert it into kinetic energy, all kinds of different sub branches of this field of research, which is very much what you dealt with, Navarre, right? Was just finding ways to convert and store those things.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, it's a new form of energy, but we already know how to do stuff with the other forms. So it's how do we use this to power what we're already doing, I think would be a lot of it. I think especially if we're in near term, this is recent, like far-flung futures, we might come up with really cool new stuff, but like the first steam engines were just used to run pumps instead of horses, so it was useful, but not that revolutionary right away.
But that does mean we're going to lead into things like magical capacitors, so converting heat, radiation, and movement and all of that stuff, converting that into just magical energy. Don't quite know what that would look like, but you would end up with Farcane capacitors, which there could be some interesting applications there of you absorbing excess heat from whatever, even potentially globally, right? And converting it into this new energy form that can be stored and used in different ways. It also sounds like, since we stated that humans, creatures, and places can act as the electrodes, that means in theory we could use other forms of energy to charge up our own magic potential, because that's really what a battery is, right? You're doing this various ways to build up the charge so that then when you tap it, that charge differential can then be converted into different kinds of work. So I'm rambling a lot because this is something I've been poking around, but does that all make sense? Is that flowing with you guys?
I think a lot of it is going to be, this is a new thing we're trying to figure out, how do we turn it in, but both turn it into other forms and use other forms to charge it for whatever. And what purposes what's a Farcane like good for, at least for our initial, like
right.
Presumably it has some, at least for, I think, it'd be good to have some initial application, and maybe that's more, so maybe it's not so much a angstiness between the science and the arcane side, but the arcane people are able to use direct application of Farcanes, where the scientists are more interested in, okay, well, how do I make an engine out of it? But
is this all making sense, Lovis?
Yeah, it's making sense. I think I was on a similar thought path. One of the notes I have is like, do you use it or are you part of it? And I think something that we talked about in the last section was like, if you're part of the system and if you can use living organisms like trees or animals and stuff as the electrode opposing you, kind of, so you feel this connection, that you then feel much more part of kind of the living system. And
Right.
so I thought maybe the basis, kind of the first things that we really find out or play around with is like, how do we like give energy back to our immediate environment? But then,
Okay.
of course, people are going to try and use it. You know, I have also a note about weaponizing it, um that we talked about, that people are always going to try and find a way to use it to for their own gain, right? So
Hmm.
Mhm.
maybe the foundational effect of it is
Yeah.
very natural and elemental, but people are then trying to use it in order to
Yeah.
um yeah, either weaponize it or make it a money maker.
So here's what's come into my mind actually. Is there's a very interesting relationship between the flow of electrons and electromagnetic fields, um, and the fact that they never exist without each other to at least a small degree. Um, but you can use either one to induce the other. So
Okay.
when you run power through a wire, that generates a magnetic field. We can also do manipulation of magnetic fields to induce flow of electrons. So what I'm thinking is, because if we're part of a battery is just a flow of power from high charge to low charge. It's not a circuit. A circuit is a more complex piece of technology, which then takes that flow and turns it to different types of work. So what I'm actually thinking is maybe the magic that we do and the old magic and that kind of stuff is the equivalent of electromagnetic fields. It's a side effect of us creating that flow. So then now that we know that, that could be a whole aspect of this, where depending on what you connect to could change the nature of that electromagnetic, that magical magnetic field, which induces these fainter magical effects. Because electromagnetic fields are hard to detect in most ways, right? So that would kind of make sense, where it's this weird, we get these weird kind of divination and instinct type magic, or slight healing effects, where it's not super pronounced, but it is something that, especially now that we know this exists and it's a little more solidified, it can become more pronounced, but not a ton. Because the amount of energy you
So
would have to flow to get a really powerful electromagnetic field is a lot.
So what you're saying is, depending what you connect to, like depending what the other electrode is, you would have access to a different kind of flow, a different a
A
different
different,
magical magnetic field, and
yeah,
therefore a different type of magic.
or a different specific magical effect.
One thing
Okay.
that didn't come up, I don't think, when we were talking before, is in electrochemistry, there's this thing called the galvanic series. And
Oh, that's going
basically,
back.
which that's kind of more magnitude wise, but you could expand it a little, but um, which actually is screen share. So this is just one I found online. There are a bunch of different versions of it, but these are kind of the half cell reactions. But basically, if you look over in this column, it looks like they kind of clipped some of it off. But this one's according to, usually they have it indexed against either hydrogen or mercury in the older ones, where you set that as 0. But kind of as you go to either end. So if you have a lithium and fluorine pair, that gives you your highest voltage, which is usually voltage is roughly equivalent to more energy. Um, it,
Yeah.
it's more
Okay.
complicated than that, but
Okay.
But we could create our own, if we really wanted to get
Yeah.
into it, people could start mapping out their own galvanic series or magical galvanic series of what it means to have different things and stuff
yeah.
as the
So
electrodes.
there could be things that are more power, but then once you get into battery stuff, you also start finding different pairs are better for. There's the difference between energy and power density. So energy density is like your total amount of storage, where power density is like your kinetics, how fast you can
Right.
charge or discharge, and then yeah, basically different people might have,
Right.
one person might just to steal the elements, but and maybe we use classical element theory, but then expand it to all of them. But some people might be more iron, and some people might be more copper, and maybe those have slightly different
Oh, I love
healing
that.
effects.
Okay.
And maybe they
Okay.
would or would not have anything to do with real elements, but maybe people would start using that just as shorthand, even though it didn't make any sense because people do that kind of thing.
Okay.
Or because for a while they're like, oh, it actually is this thing, and then they're like, no, it's not, but it caught on. Kind of like current actually is the flow of holes and not electrons, because we didn't know about electrons yet when we figured out which direction current went. So
Right. Okay. This
I
is making
really
more
like
sense.
that. Yeah.
So then on the human interaction side, the magic of old is kind of having a resurgence, because with this new clarification of how it works, and with a little bit of the technology that comes out, it's easier to establish those connections, meaning it's easier for us to intentionally start mapping out these things and start producing these these magical magnetic fields, electromagical fields. I don't know, but to produce these fields for these more old magic effects. And that's like one side. And as things go through the ages, it could start getting very, very scientific, where it's like you get them where they are breaking down like power potential, voltage potential, and like you get the most of this by connecting yourself to this type of thing, but that's you flowing Farcanes to the object. If you want to flow the Farcanes to yourself, you need this type of thing. And the
Oh,
direction you're flowing
yes.
it will change. Like
Okay.
down the line, this could become like very, very detailed. But since we're dealing with near future, I'm okay with that. I just wanted to make sure. Right now, it's still very much conceptual level that has made
yeah.
people prove that old magic exists and amp it up just a little bit.
Oh, but
Yeah.
now I really like this concept. Now I really
I mean, I'm picturing this as, I don't know if you guys ever listened to Writing Excuses,
Oh
or I
yeah,
think Brandon
Yes.
Sanderson has mentioned this too, but there's like the whole world building iceberg, and this is probably a lot of the stuff that's down under the water
yes,
that doesn't make it into the story, but
It's not the
we
tip of
know
the
it's going
iceberg,
to
no.
eventually get there. Um,
yeah.
I
Which
really like this though, that like because that would have a huge impact on like relationships, because you would seek certain people out for
yeah, because
certain
I
purposes.
think early days you could even just be like, we know there's a difference, but we don't know.
right, right,
We know this guy is better at healing, and this person is better
right,
at melting rocks,
and that
but
can
Right.
and that can connect to the rituals, right? Is, for
Mhm.
example, some of the different divination stuff, like you connecting to the movement of birds or connecting to the casting of rune stones and stuff like that.
Mhm.
There is something there about the power, the direction of the energy, and the gap that is leading to this effect of you getting better intuition of the future, as opposed to some others that are focused more on healing and some others that are focused more on like matter manipulation, stuff like that. So we
Mhm.
have that whole aspect. And then we have the more technical aspect, which I think you're right. I think, which something else I meant to mention is anybody watching this, is if you haven't, check out Writing Excuses. It is amazing. If you have the money and can get on it, every year they do a Writing Excuses cruise and writing retreat, which is incredible. I have been lucky enough to go twice, and you will learn so much and meet so many amazing people. But back to this, with uh, something that people who do research, I think, take for granted is, compared to people who haven't, is how this kind of stuff does develop. It's not just bam, whole new field. There is a accidental discovery that then turns into a very specific application, which people then rationally build off of. So with that, Navarre, what do you think that first application is going to be?
I mean, I think
Put
right
you on the
now we're
spot.
looking at I think we're at the point where we're ramping up right now into the renewable energy space, and there's definitely still CERN and some high energy physics stuff. I'm picturing some confluence of those kind of two things where someone's trying some edgy high energy physics thing to find a new energy source. It's just not what they expected it was going to be.
That's
sort of thing.
That's what I was thinking. Is somebody created this weird arcane engine that they can use to charge capacitors, and nobody can explain where the energy is coming from until like the actual identification of the Farcanes.
Yeah, which if we want to do the rip from the headlines, although it's been going on for a little bit, but I know there's been some little tiny bit of research into like the Casimir effect, and also I'm trying to think of what it's called. There's this thing where what's it called? I can't remember the name of the process, but maybe 5 or 10 years ago I heard about it, and I think there's only been a tiny bit of research. But there are some experiments where they think they get more energy out than they put in systems with collapsing bubbles in a fluid, and I'm not sure if it's related to the Casimir effect. There are a few really, really edgy, weird things that you could use as sort of a rip this from the paper of something where nobody knows what's going on yet, and use that as kind of a somebody figured it out and it was actually magic.
Arcanes could be an explanation of cold fusion. Because all of the heat was being dumped into Farcanes.
This would be so unsatisfying for any scientist. They'd be like, "Would you mean it was magic?"
Well, but that's the thing, is it's not magic. It's just a new particle, which we are branching into a different area of my definition of magic. And my definition is just anything enabling effects or abilities beyond our capability or understanding. Like that includes advanced tech. This is just a new form of tech that also explains our old world magic, is really all it is.
Yeah, because I was kind of picturing in my head too, like Merlin and Arthur were actually a really strong like electrode pairing,
right?
But they kind of they figured out at least some of the secret, and then they kept the part that Arthur was actually really important for that kind of on the DL, because they didn't want people to know that you had to have 2 people,
right?
And the knowledge was lost over time again,
right?
So like throughout history, all these important like behind every sorcerer or sorceress, there was just like another person who was the other electrode who never really got the who was never like in the public eye.
So yeah, I think our 2 starting points for the tech could very much be that somehow people are turning taking energy from Farcanes and turning it into electrical energy. And I'm also thinking another potential one where maybe this is the newer one. They are finding a way to take heat and dump it into Farcanes instead, because that alone would make a lot of our tech so much safer if we could.
Yeah, because dumping heat is always tricky.
Thermal runaway. We talked about this a little bit before we started. It's just where the heat is being built up faster than it can be dissipated, which is causing your reactions to accelerate. Nuclear reactors. So if they find a way to do that, they could stabilize nuclear reactors.
Especially if you figured out how to dump radiation into Farcanes, and if the Farcanes are not dangerous to human, well, at least not sitting there aren't dangerous to human health.
Not that we yet know of.
Yeah.
For all we know, Farcanes could be another cause of cancer or another cause of aging that we won't know until this area gets researched and there's more buildup and things are changed from the normal in ways that we can actually monitor.
Until then, we might end up with X-ray machines in the shoe store, but which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but like early days of X-rays, they'd have like little X-ray machines you could stick your foot in the shoe store with the shoe on and see how it fit and stuff, because they didn't know that radiation was that bad for you.
Yeah. Okay. I know this was Go ahead.
Sorry, I need clarification on something. Because I don't know if this is actually how anything works. Because you said take heat and dump it into Farcanes. Does that mean you make more Farcanes, which you can then use for electricity? Or what does dumping into Farcanes mean?
Yeah, just transmuting them into Farcanes, and then you
Yeah,
store
so then you would have
those,
more
and then
Farcanes.
yeah, and then you just transfer those back to whatever else you want.
Yeah, because what
Okay.
was the term for the thermal ones?
The phonons.
Yeah, you were
Yeah,
converting phonons into Farcanes.
Okay, and then those you can turn that into any other kind of electricity or something.
Okay.
which of course there'll be losses there. So how that works will be
Because there are
interesting.
inefficiencies everywhere.
And everything.
Yeah.
Yep. Normally what we do is we walk through the blueprint and discuss the implications of different settings. Here, since the setting and the thematic overlap was such a big component for you, that's why I wanted to discuss this first. I wanted to make sure that we had a clear map of the implications of the magic, and now we can take those implications and use those to fill out the blueprint, which is something I've talked about on occasion, but I've never actually shown it to date, I don't think. I usually use the blueprint to lead into the world building, but you can take world building or magic system or story that you already have and interpret what you have into the blueprint. And that's kind of what we're going to do here. So some of this might go very fast. One, just because. But again, I've been talking a lot. I want to give you guys a chance. Is there anything you guys wanted to touch on first before we really dig into this?
I don't
Ready.
think so. I think, yeah.
Okay, cool. Then I can just edit out the spot where I repeatedly ask you guys questions and just look very selfish. It'll be fine. So just from what we have talked about, I'm pretty sure that we are going to be ending up with a fairly soft but fairly rational magic system. Because
yeah, I think over time that'll trend upward into hard, but yeah, where we are in time, I think it's still pretty soft. But
so I think it depends, which this is something that would be interesting. If we discovered Farcanes as part of the old magic, I feel like it would start harder because we would feel that we already know everything that it can do. And then people discover that it's actually a new form of energy and can relate into all of our understanding of science. I personally think that the second we connect it as a new field of science or even to another field of science, it's going to make it fairly soft. Because anybody who may be middle of the road, this might be a generalization. My feeling about science is the more I know about science, the more I understand how much we don't know.
yeah.
So like the more we research, the softer science actually becomes because there's so much that we still don't know. So like the bubble of what there is to know just keeps getting bigger the more you understand. It is incredibly rational, and that's where we're following all of these patterns. There could be these galvanic charts, and there's going to be devices that are like, you may end up having specific transistors inside your circuits that convert electrical energy into magical energy, into Farcanes, and vice versa, and stuff like that. So extremely rational, but I think it's probably going to be around there. Does that track?
That seems reasonable.
Okay.
Would people be using what we know about like energy sources that we already know about? Like, would they be like, I wonder if a galvanic series is applicable because we know that about.
I would think that that's where a lot of the research would start, would be, I think in most fields, it's like, okay, we know this about something that seems similar.
Yes.
So we start from there, and then as it builds out, we maybe stray more or less from that.
How is it the same and how is it different from these things we already know and understand?
Yeah, because like in my understanding of magic and witchcraft, which is very, very small, is just that there are usually a lot of certain materials or items from the natural world often have certain, at least symbolic um, attunements associated with them. So,
which, as a follow-on from our last guest, who is a therapist, um, it can't be the same world because of the nature of what we built for her, but um, the magic and the Farcanes could actually end up being that connecting point between psychology and the hard sciences. Where, like, maybe the stuff, part of what isn't making it repeatable is the consciousness and the way our minds work. And if that has a ripple effect, if that is creating a form of radiation or fields within of Farcane energy, then we would be able to start quantifying a lot more of that. And that would explain why intent and a lot of the other things that traditionally go with magic are connected to Farcanes. But anyway, okay. All right. So next we have transference. This is a little tricky, but we want to look at transference at this exact point in time, which I feel like this is actually pretty high, because we've talked about, like, anybody can be an electrode, anything, like any creature, any place, all of that can be electrodes. Not only that, we can convert it into other kinds of energy. So, like, this is extremely transferable as we start to understand what it can actually do. Because then once you get the energy moving, that means we can use it to create magical effects in any number of ways. And then the very specific applications may be more or less transferable, but just magic in general is everywhere and used by everybody.
Then the prevalence would also be quite high.
I think so, because this is a natural, we have made it a natural form of energy in our world that we were just unaware of.
Yeah. So anything on Earth could possibly be. Which
yeah.
also
Are we
kind of,
saying both biotic and abiotic? Kind of.
I think so. There might be. I'm assuming that there are differences, but we might not know what those are exactly yet. But like, obviously, not non-living things probably can't, or maybe can't. I don't know. Probably don't have what we would think of as intent.
Right.
Maybe, but
right. So with non-living things, it would be more like dealing with the dielectric constant, which dielectric constant is the amount of charge difference that needs to be present in order for an arc of electricity to happen through that medium. You may end up with that, where you need a rock and a tree of a big enough disparity for there to be a magical arc between the two. And then when the arc happens, that makes things happen. But they aren't intentionally linking themselves to things the way we could.
And some of this could tie to, like, that at least kind of reflects a lot of the both from the Western and my limited understanding of other indigenous cultures, of everything having a certain amount of spirit. Although I'm sure, again, this is me kludging together my Western interpretation of things. So apologies to indigenous scholars and indigenous people out there for my misunderstanding of things. But
if you wanted to do that in a story, we would need to do more research and brainstorming. It's fine, but that would be very cool, like taking some of the Asiatic concepts of, like, everything having a spirit or a demon associated with it, and that ending up being the foundation of our galvanic charts. Of, they're like, yeah, these things have very powerful demons. Turns out that those have a large galvanic gap between us and them, and that's anyway.
Yeah, because it seems like a lot of cultures all over the world have some sort of spirit or chi or things of this nature. So
I really like this.
Again, hearkening back to, this has always been here. It just took us a while to figure out something new about it.
Which we did by accident, of course.
That's how most science happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to source, which internal or external. This one's tricky. I feel like it might be both, because this is asking whether heat is internal or external.
Hmm.
I don't know. What do you guys
Yeah,
think?
because I think everyone has their own potential, but since you need to work with someone or something else to be able to do work with the magic,
Yeah, it's both.
yeah.
There's your internal component, but you have to connect with something external in order to make it happen.
And I don't
If we
know if
had to pick,
it's
I would say it's probably more external than internal, simply because
mhm,
then as they convert it into technology, the technology is mostly going to be external.
mhm. I just keep thinking about just the source thing makes me remember that I keep thinking about like what would be the Farcane potential of like the humongous fungus or that giant aspen. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's either both or it's a little more external than internal. Um, Either way, depending on who was interpreting it.
yeah,
And uh, finite, renewable, or infinite. What are you guys thinking?
I'm thinking renewable just from sort of the battery perspective of like you can deplete it, but you can
Rechargeable.
also recharge it. But and maybe there's like a certain amount of flux to an area that recharges things over time. Um,
Yeah, I think
but you
if
can
you
temporarily exhaust it and need to recharge.
yeah, I
Um,
think if you looked at a universal or cosmic level, um, it could be infinite or finite, depending on like how massive you want it to look, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but I do think in general, day to day, in terms of us as users and as how it affects in technology, it's going to be renewable, right? Um, okay,
Yeah, like temporarily finite, but eventually renewable if you're, or rechargeable if you're thinking of that. Because
yeah,
that
yeah,
would be an interesting kind of limitation to the magic, right? If you have like a a charge as it pertains to battery level,
right, right,
and then you have to recharge before you can do anything else.
right,
It gives people and things a capacity
yeah,
that they cannot overstep. Um,
yeah. And flux, maybe that flux travels along ley lines, and they're actually some sort of like Earth circuit for the Farcanes
yeah,
to travel along.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and that could even explain why there's interesting stuff of when I'm performing magic as a wizard at that point. Um, there's some stuff that I can really only do once every so often because it requires a large charge potential. And the second I do that, I've depleted a bunch of my charge. So
mhm.
I no longer have the charge necessary to do it again. Oh boy. Okay. Flux, I swear I didn't fill this thing out in advance. I think flux is fine where it is, just sitting at positive. Because while the energy itself you could consider neutral because it's just there in the world, the the perception, utilization, and manipulation of this form of energy is just going to go up, and it's going to
Yeah.
go up rapidly.
as we understand more and more about it.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
what do
so
you
we'll
get?
find new applications and also probably get more efficient at using it. So,
Right. What do you think for naturalness? Which, by the way, if anybody watching this is hearing these terms and doesn't know what these mean, we're skipping over a lot of the explanation for sake of theoretical brevity. There's lots of other videos on my channel, or the videos with Corey or Moya. We talk about these specific pieces a little more. But what are you guys thinking about naturalness?
I'm assuming it's going to be quite high
yeah, because it's
because
something
it's a
kind of
naturally occurring thing.
mhm,
I
at least here on Earth.
I
Yeah.
think so, because even the aspect of it feeling like a little odd will quickly go away as we start to see the parallels between what we understood of the world before and what we understand of the world now. It's very quickly going to click in to our understanding of the world that we already have. What about ease of use? I'm thinking that's probably going to
Yeah, it's
be
probably
lower.
lower.
Yeah, because
Since
we have no
especially
idea how
since
to use it yet.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We're still trying things out, experimenting.
Yeah, because right now, when it first shows up, the most effective, reliable way to do it is to fall on the old ways, which isn't necessarily efficient, but it is in theory at least safe, hopefully.
Or you go the other route and look at it from kind of a scientific perspective and start applying things like galvanic series and
Right.
kind of the theory that we know about photons and phonons.
Really, my question is, do we think it's low or medium low?
I think medium low, because I think the traditional magical practitioners will be able to jump in and
That's what I was thinking.
supercharge what they're already doing.
If it was
quickly.
just tech, I would say very low, because we're still researching and we aren't really in a effective application stage yet.
Yeah.
Reliability. Do we need to move reliability?
Does it relate to ease of use? Like, because we don't really understand.
Yeah, there are a lot of
how it
variables, so I'm
works.
assuming it's still low because we don't know what all does affect it. And I'm assuming at some point we're going to run into maybe there's some sort of dendrite formation in this energy source.
Right,
Ooh.
right. We haven't
If you
talked
want
about
to
that at all.
introduce a certain amount, but maybe that only shows up just like in a battery, it only shows up in certain pairings and
with overuse
over a long period of
Yes.
time. So that might only just be starting to, it's happened a couple times and nobody
Right.
knows what happened, where
Right.
things just like went off the rails.
Yeah. I
but
think
I love that we're putting dendrites in here.
I think it's going to be pretty middle of the road, because in theory, if you follow the same steps every time, it will do the same thing. The lower reliability is due to our lack of understanding at this point.
Yeah. So yeah, so it should be reliable, but we don't know enough to make it higher.
And then consistency. So just real quick, consistency is, again, how these other settings vary depending on what part of the magic system you're looking at. Really what we're looking at is how big a difference are there in these settings when we're looking at it from the technology side, or when we're looking at it from the old magic side. I feel they're fairly similar, with maybe ease of use and reliability being higher on the spectrum for the old ways, simply because that has been done before.
I guess also, how much does, if we have something like this galvanic series playing into it, does that affect our consistency?
Well, no, because it wouldn't, just having like the galvanic series or anything, that's not going to change the level of transference of the magic, the prevalence, the flux, the source. It's just going to be as natural.
That's just going to affect the effects.
Yeah, really, it's just going to change the effects. And really the only things in all of this that are going to change are going to be ease of use and reliability. And maybe it's shifting up towards hard. Again, from my argument, I don't think it'll get fully onto the hard half, or not very high, but those are the only things that would be changing, and even then I don't think a ton. So I'm personally almost leaning towards medium high consistency.
Okay, that seems reasonable.
Okay.
That might be the fastest we've ever completed that particular page.
It's the fastest we've completed the blueprint. We still had like 20 minutes of us talking through the world and all of that first.
Yeah, I think the pre-work helped make this part pretty straightforward.
Pretty speedy.
Yeah. Which, again, is just something that I want to point out as super awesome. There, you can use the blueprint however you need to. Okay, I'm going to stop shilling my stuff because it makes me uncomfortable. But that is the magic system blueprint. That is our blueprint for this arcane / energy magic that we are building. And the next part of this series with Navarre is going to be digging into what I just affectionately call the narrative shenanigans over on ecofictology. But before we cut off, Navarre, where can people find you?
So if you want to stay on YouTube, I am here as solarpunk station. If you want a lot more content, I've been writing on my blog a lot longer than I've been on YouTube, which is also solarpunk station. And you can find me on Twitter. I'm pretty sure I'm Bartz Navarre over there. And I also recently was in an anthology called the Almanac of the Anthropocene, which is out from West Virginia University Press.
Nice. All right. And Lovis, is there anything you want as you're closing out? Anything you want to say?
Don't go anywhere. Please come with us over to ecovictology, because part 4 is where we come up with a story to communicate all of this and where we get to explore this magic system more. And I'm super excited because this is very, very cool. And I think we can come up with a really cool story.
And that video should be live now. So please do like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Do check out Solarpunk Station and like and subscribe there as well if you enjoy the content. And then now just don't sit here and listen to me any longer. Go over to ecofictology. But if you can't do that right now, that's fine. Just whatever you do, keep writing and stay awesome.